Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to ULT San Diego for the Aquarian series. The title of this afternoon's presentation is Non-Possession, and that will be given to us by our dynamic duo, Jonathan Colbert and Ken Small. Okay, before we move ahead, a reading this from the voice of the silence. Stern and exacting is the virtue of viraga. If thou its path wouldst master, thou must keep thy mind and thy perceptions far freer than before from killing action. Thou hast to saturate thyself with pure alaya, become as one with nature's soul thought. At one with it, thou art invincible. In separation, thou becomest the playground of Samvriti, origin of all the world's delusions. All is impermanent in man except the pure, bright essence of Alaya. Man is its crystal ray, a beam of light immaculate within, a form of clay material upon the lower surface. That beam is thy life guide and thy true self, the watcher and the silent thinker, the victim of thy lower self. Thy soul cannot be hurt but through the erring body. Control and master both, and thou art safe when crossing to the nearing gate of balance. We give to you now our own Jonathan Colbert and Ken Small.
Thank you, Monica. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Our theme in the Aquarian Almanac this week is non-possession, and it's very much akin to the principles that we talked about before of Gandhian trusteeship, as well as, I would say, renunciation, which is actually a very common theme in theosophy and in, I would say, Eastern philosophy. And it's very much in line with the idea of ahimsa. And it's a way of living nonviolently. And a great practitioner of non-possession was Mohandas K. Gandhi. And so we'll be exploring some of his ideas on this. And we'll also be taking a look at some of the writings of Jasper Niemand, who is a disciple of William Quan Judge. So the way we're going to do this format tonight is we'll do two short talks by me and Ken, and then he and I will dialogue a little bit, just a few minutes, and then we'll just open it up to the forum here and to the lodge, and also to all of you on Zoom tonight. So we'll start with this quotation here from Hermes, because the editor of Hermes is the one that kind of came up with this Aquarian Almanac in the first place. And so it was very much kind of from the same mind and the same kind of Aquarian mindset that the Almanac was kind of breathed into life, Professor Raghavan Iyer. And so this quote is from him in the magazine Hermes. It is only when we voluntarily relinquish our unnatural claims and consecrate ourselves to a higher purpose that we can freely enjoy what we have. So this is implying that ownership might be actually a maya, a fraud. That do we really own anything? And they have the expression, can you take it with you when you go, right? But this is not just waiting till we expire, that we don't own all these things anymore, but it's voluntarily relinquishing them. And then we're going to be exploring, in both talks, actually, this idea of, are we really getting rid of all of our possessions? Is it a state of mind? Things like that. So, go to the next slide here. We'll start off with this slide here. Let me see something here. This is a very famous expression found in the New Testament, where Jesus, he tells his students that actually blessed are the poor. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. It is so paradoxical. And what could this possibly mean? And does it mean that they're spiritually poor? Is that what being poor in spirit, would mean? Or is it making a distinction, which is how I would read it, between saying poor in spirit would be a distinction between being poor in material things. So in other words, it's not really talking about being poor in material things. It's saying be from a spiritual perspective, a kind of poverty of spirit, a subjective posture, you could say. The opposite of arrogance, the opposite of showing off, the opposite of drawing attention to oneself. Appearing, there is that expression in the Light in the Path that one of the great powers that a disciple can actually covet is that of the ability to appear as nothing in the eyes of men. High beings are good at these kind of things. So I'm going to do some quotes from Gandhi, especially from Yeravda Mandir. My understanding is that Yeravda is actually the name of a prison that he was in. So he called it a mandir, which is like a sacred dwelling, because wherever Gandhi was, it would be that, wouldn't it? And so he was writing letters of guidance and counsel to ashrams that he had set up from jail. It's like a little bit like the idea of, the letter from the Birmingham jail, of Dr. Martin Luther King, where some of these high beings do their best work when they're confined. And he was writing to an ashram, I think it was called the Satyagraha ashram. And it's also subtitled, this pamphlet, this book, Ashram Observances. So in one case, he talked about non-possession, which is the title of our presentation today. Non-possession is allied to non-stealing. A thing not originally stolen must nevertheless be classified as stolen property if we possess it without needing it. So it's not that possessions are bad or good. It's unnecessary possessions. And I think as we go along, we're going to find that it's not just physical possessions, but it's psychological possessions. It's our virtues. I mean, are our virtues really ours? Or are they part of forces and energies in nature, for example? He wrote, "A seeker after truth, a follower of the law of love, cannot hold anything against tomorrow. God never stores for the morrow. He never creates more than what is strictly needed for the moment. If therefore we repose faith in his providence, we should rest assured that he will give us every day our daily bread, meaning everything that we require. So it does seem that that's the case, that people who hoard too much stuff or who try and stack up too much money or get really distracted from any kind of a spiritual path by acquiring the acquisitive nature, whether it's physical or psychological property, whether it's too many books or too many anything, it could be anything, then one is really psychologically trying to store up for the future, trying to get ready and making sure everything's going to be okay for the future. And that's something that we don't know anything about anyway. We just don't know about the future. And secondly, are all these material things really going to help us? Thirdly, according to Gandhi, providence, that there's something, if you believe in God or whether you believe in karmic law or any kind of a providence idea, have faith in that the universe will provide. It's going to be okay. He says that our ignorance or negligence of the divine law, which gives to man, by the way, when he says divine law or God, they're pretty much interchangeable, which gives to man, so I'll start over, our ignorance or negligence of the divine law, which gives to man from day to day his daily bread and no more, has given rise to inequalities with all the miseries attendant upon them. The rich have a superfluous store of things which they do not need, and which are therefore neglected and wasted. That's another shame. Think about the elementals, and if you have a lot of objects, and those poor elementals are being neglected. That just occurred to me. Okay, all this is going on while millions are starved to death for want of sustenance. In the Key to Theosophy, where HPB talks about the four golden links, which are universal unity and causation, human solidarity, karma, and reincarnation, she talks about the connection between the behavior and the excesses and the self-indulgences of the rich, as opposed to that there's a connection to that between the want and the starvation and the poverty. There just is a connection. And it's kind of like part of the economy of things. And it's kind of a moral economy. Interesting that so much of what Gandhi writes about, you could say they either came from the Key to Theosophy or from the Bhagavad Gita. Really, I mean, if some scholar really analyzed Gandhi's writings, those two are the main sources, because he was a closet theosophist. When he was in South Africa, he was a public theosophist, and he was an officer in the society and so forth. But when he did his work in India, he kind of reframed his presentation as being a Hindu, which he had his reasons for that. He's saying that if each retains possession only of what he needed, no one would be in want. And this is that classical use of the word want, which is closer to the word need, right? And all would live in contentment. As it is, the rich are discontented no less than the poor. The poor man would fain become a millionaire, and the millionaire a multimillionaire. The rich should take the initiative in this case in dispossession with a view to a universal diffusion of the spirit of contentment. His phrases have a deep meaning, and they are to be thought about a lot. We always think of Gandhi as a karma yogin, and he was that, but he was also a bhakti yogin, and he was also a jnana yogin. He's very thoughtful. He thought through everything. And in that way, he practiced universalization and individuation together. His thinking is so precise in a way. This is from a different collection of his writings. It talks about the application of ahimsa. He's not proposing that there be a Bolshevik revolution or any kind of violence. He says, I'm no socialist, and I do not want to dispossess those who have got possessions. But I do say that personally, those of us who want to see light out of darkness have to follow this rule. I do not want to dispossess anybody. I should then be departing from the rule of ahimsa, which is nonviolence. If somebody else possesses more than I do, let him. But so far as my own life has to be regulated, I do say that I dare not possess anything which I do not want. And again, want is in that more classical use of the word want, which is need, I think, here. So, and it's a little bit like Martin Luther King. He had, I think it was 10 or 11 vows that he would have his closest followers follow. They weren't like commandments, but they were, I think he called them vows. And they were pledges. Pledge is the word, actually. And they were pledges of nonviolence. They were pledges of agape, which is unconditional love. There's 11 of them, if I remember right. So Gandhi was like that too, that the closer that people were to him, the more they were held to a standard, really. And he is basically saying that in his situation and his pioneering of this whole science of ahimsa and non-possession, that he had to hold himself to a certain standard. Can't remember what he was said to have only owned, like a watch and his loincloth or something like that. Hardly anything. Now we're going to switch over to Jasper Neiman. And why do I have a picture of a woman? Because Jasper was really a Julia, and she wrote under a pseudonym. Interestingly enough, speaking of Gandhi, she was married to one of the Keightley nephew, uncle people that Gandhi thought were actually brothers because they're only 2 years apart. And he met them in London. I have a historian in the audience, so I got to watch what I say. But basically, and she was married to one of them. Oh, but Gandhi met one of them. The way that Gandhi got into theosophy was he met them in a restaurant, in a vegetarian restaurant, the Keightley. You can't say he called them brothers, but he was mistaken. They were one was an uncle, one was a nephew. Archibald Keightley and Bertrand Keightley. I think. Can't remember which one's which, but they're the ones that introduced him to HPB, H.P. Blavatsky, and Annie Besant, and they in turn turned him on to the Bhagavad Gita, and then he read the Key to Theosophy, which is why so much of his writing and his thinking, they come right out of the Key to Theosophy and the Gita, because they had him translate the Bhagavad Gita to, I don't know why they did that, but it sure did him a lot of good, because he learned that really the wisdom of India is where the deep-rooted wisdom of India is going to have to be the foundation of the future of India, really. but I do digress. So Jasper Neiman was a very deep student of William Quan Judge, as was Catherine Tingley and others. And so there's an article that Jasper Neiman wrote. It's called The Vow of Poverty. And I'm going to say, because that's what she was, Julia, the vow of poverty excludes all personal sense of possession, even to the virtues in which the personal self has pride and which it loves, and the thoughts which constitute those riches of the human mind which inhibit the entrance to the kingdom of heaven. So it really has to do with a sense of possession. It may or may not have to do with possessions. Those would depend on our sense of possession in relationship to them. So this is getting into the subjective realm. So it's not just the objects, because last week we learned about subject and object, right? So we're moving from the objective, you could say, to the subjective. And we're learning how to see that which is objective as objective, to discern between them. So that's kind of the movement of going from this continuum and moving through the continuum of the objective and the subjective. It has to do with the personal self it has to deal with this intractable problem of pride, which is the most difficult of the 7 deadly sins. And so in that sense, let me get to the next slide here. In that sense, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Now, it could be the problem of rich people, could be that's what's being talked about, but it's also the pride of so-called possessions that are mental possessions. You could even say the pride of the priestcraft, the pride of the Brahmins in India, you could say. The pride of any kind of, or the pride of academics. I know this. And the theosophical approach is, instead of behold, I know, it's thus have I heard. It's a shift in gears, and a shift in approach. So Jasper Neiman writes, and in explanation of this, the rich man who finds it so difficult to enter is he who loves and clings to his personal self-consciousness, to the images and forms of his own mind. So that kind of gets a deeper dimension to this non-possession idea. Jasper Neiman is like a mystical writer. Julia, sorry, is like a theosophical mystic. She's a lot like reading Judge, actually. And there's a reason for that, because the letters that have helped me, that's all written to Jasper Neiman. Jasper Neiman is the correspondent. So in other words, you'll see in letters that have helped me, your letter of this day, put me in this kind of an attitude or something like that. Well, this is, so in some ways, when you read Jasper Neiman, you're going to think, this person's almost like an equal to Judge. Amazing being. Anyway, so there's this piece of writing here. She writes, he no longer desires anything for himself. He has taken the vow of poverty, for he has found his own soul. And that's a whole mystical theme in this author's writings, is the idea of finding the soul. I think it has to do with the theosophical idea of individuation, but I can be corrected on that. Okay, this has found the soul and finds the soul to be both poor and lonely. Very interesting, because it has nothing of its own and is nothing in itself. It has no life snatched from the great whole and peculiar to itself, but moves with the moving ocean of being. So I think that's another aspect of this idea of non-possession, is that it's like appropriating something that isn't one's own. Like the natives, the indigenous nations of both Americas, from my understanding, they just couldn't get the idea that people would own land. It's like owning the sky, owning the ocean. What are you talking about? And then it goes to, and a lot of that goes into the idea, well, I got to own it so that other people can't come on this property. Well, the whole thing's just foreign. Um, or I want to own it so I can pass it on to my kids. You know, that's like storing it for the future. And these mystics like Gandhi and Jasper Neiman and others, they just don't think like that because they're not into possessions and being possessive. Speaking of being possessive, it would probably go into the idea of relationships. I'm sure we've all been in relationships where somebody thought that they owned us, you know, or that we've trespassed and thought that in ways that we never dreamed of, that we had some kind of claim to somebody else's allegiance, when really it doesn't make any sense. And in terms of, and it's probably a clue to healthy relationships, is that people give each other space to grow and to individuate. All of that must come from the idea of reincarnation, because if you're in a relationship with someone, one has to remember that this person is an old soul. They have so much experience, and that they're going to need uh, to change and so forth and grow. But I did digress. When the vow when the vow of poverty is taken, Jasper Neiman writes, all is changed. The man has transcended his personal self. That's what this whole thing is about. It's about transcending the personal self and coming into a whole new life. He has entered a diviner order of being. Henceforward, the law of that new order guides and enfolds him. Now, we heard earlier that Gandhi spoke of the law of love. So, the law of this new order, the whole new dynamic going on. So, there's a very short sentence from The Voice of the Silence that I'll end with, where HPB writes in The Voice of the Silence, give up thy life if thou wouldst to live. And then there's a footnote, give up the life of the physical personality if you would live in spirit. You want to come up here, Ken? This is PowerPoint. You know PowerPoint better than I do. So, all yours. It's a touchpad thing. Oh, you know what? Hit the shift. Let me get you going. I apologize. I should have done the. This is why we edit these things. Is this it? Let me get rid of this thing. You want to hit play, or slideshow. And then do that.
And then we get the next one. What do I do?
Maybe just touch the,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
To go backwards. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. This part of this presentation on non-possession will delve into a very particular area, which may at first seem a little unusual. What does the word non mean? And why is this important? So in Jonathan's presentation, I'll go to the next one. So I'm going to shift from talking about non-possession to non-thinking as an example. So in Japanese, in Zen Buddhist view, there is the idea of non-thinking, hishiryo, which literally means non-thinking. But this is different than not thinking. Shiryo means thinking, and he is a prefix of negation and opposition as non. So hishiryo amounts to unthank or unthinking or not the matter of thinking. So great master Yakusan Kodo was sitting in Zazen. The monk asked him, in steadfast meditation, what are you thinking? Yakusan said, thinking of not thinking. A monk said, how are you thinking of not thinking? Non-thinking. In answering Hishiryo, Yakusan is pointing out a realm beyond discriminative thinking, a realm of being one with not thinking, which is the original person or true person. It's a little subtle at first, but we actually do this all the time. So if I have something, oh, not visible. So if we have something, like pick up something, I have it. If I put it down, I don't have it. We say this linguistically, but then the whole activity, what is that? We don't linguistically, we do this all the time, but we don't have language that covers it very clearly. Earlier text from the Shinjin Mei, empty enlightenment illuminates itself. There is no need for the slightest mental effort. It is a realm of non-thinking, a realm beyond reasoning and emotions. In this context, Hishiryo is explained as a realm beyond the ability of reasoning and emotions. A monk asked, what is a realm of non-thinking like? Unman said, beyond apprehension of reasoning and emotions. So there are three phases. There's thinking, Shiryo, not thinking, Ushiryo. And then there's non-thinking. Thinking of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Yep. The answer is non-thinking. We can see this in our daily experience, I think, because if I tell everyone in the room or in Zoom right now, don't think of pink elephants. Mm-hmm. So I then try to push that out of the way. It would require something other than thinking or not thinking, which is non-thinking. Mm-hmm. So it's the same, often made approach to meditation, people sometimes come in and think, oh, I tried to get all the thoughts out of my mind and I couldn't do that. It was impossible. Yeah, so that's trying to think of not thinking. Doesn't work. However, allowing the space of non-thinking, where thoughts and feelings, emotions arise and disappear all by themselves, is what's being talked about here. So possession is usually looked at in the dualistic framework of either having or not having, either holding or rejecting the object, whether an outer object or an inner object, past, present, or future. Non opens the door to an awareness of a third factor based on a larger non-dual view. View becomes central. This was alluded to in Jonathan's talk, where he's quoting Jasper Neiman, and how possession is not just to do with objects, but also with internal mental and emotional states. So there's a lot that could be unpacked and unfolded here. We'll save it for our dialogue and questions and answers, but I just give this one quote from Blavatsky. So view becomes more central and important. And in the Secret Doctrine, early part of the Secret Doctrine reference there, she gives a rather poetic and mystical view of what she calls the transmural view. You could call a different way of her expressing the first fundamental proposition of the Secret Doctrine, unified foundation principle. So on seeking the source, how is this to be done? What is the best way for achieving such an object was the ever-recurring question. To make our plan clearer, an illustration may be attempted. When a tourist coming from a well-explored country suddenly reaches the borderland of a terra incognita, hedged in and shut out from view by a formidable barrier of impassable rocks, he may still refuse to acknowledge himself baffled in his exploratory plans. Ingress beyond is forbidden, but if he cannot visit the mysterious region personally, he may still find a means of examining it from as short a distance as can be arrived at. Helped by his knowledge of landscapes left behind him, he can get a general and pretty correct idea of the transmural view, if he will only climb to the loftiest summit of the altitudes in front of him. Once there, he can gaze at it at his leisure, comparing that which he dimly perceives with that which he has just left below, now that he is, thanks to his efforts, beyond the line of the mists and the cloud-capped cliffs. So Blavatsky giving us an image, very vivid image, but using a very unusual word, transmural. And this is one of the unique parts of Blavatsky. This is the only place this word is used this way in the English language. So transmural meaning, transmural, existing or occurring across the entire wall, the same from both sides. But it's a medical term in English. Oh. But she didn't use the word transcendental. She used the word transmural very, very intentionally. The same from both sides. It's a very interesting word. Very interesting view. Very non-dual view. And very much relates to the first fundamental proposition. One omnipresent, eternal, and boundless and immutable principle. Unthinkable and unspeakable. Dwarfed by transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. This is the transmural view. So again, back to the subject of non-possession, I just leave it with non-possession. The understanding is based on our view. We can't, view is central to understanding non-possession. I added a quote from Kabir, the great Indian mystic poet, which is also the same view, basically, as what Blavatsky is expounding. This is the English version by Robert Bly. Between the conscious and the unconscious, the mind has put up a swing. All earth creatures, even the supernovas, sway between these two trees, and it never winds down. Angels, animals, humans, insects by the million, also the wheeling sun and moon. Ages go by, and it goes on. Everything is swinging. Heaven, earth, water, fire, and the secret one slowly growing a body. Kabir saw that for 15 seconds, and it made him a servant for life. So, encapsulating this in a very brief overview, it can be said that a millisecond of that view is what brings us to realize non-possession.
So because I would imagine that this idea of non-possession, once that a person starts really thinking about it, that a person would personalize it too much. What about me? What am I supposed to be doing? What are they saying is what the cool kids do? You know what I'm saying? I don't get this. Non-possession. Don't you have to have a car? I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. Like that kind of thinking, right? And then it occurred to me that one of the things, like in the Great Master's letter, he's saying that one of the biggest challenges is to get rid of the ego. And that can be really opaque. What does that mean? And it's almost like the pink elephant problem. I'm going to get rid of this thing. And then the more I try and get rid of it, aren't I focusing on this ego that I'm trying to get rid of? No. So you seem to be pointing to trying to get us beyond all that. I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the non-possession is not something, the solution to the problem isn't through thinking. It has to be through activity. And like in The Voice of Science, where Blavatsky says, self-knowledge is of loving deeds, the child, self-knowledge. She doesn't say self-knowledge is when you read this book 100 times and analyze it. Quite stunning. And then also she reiterates, for example, in the Theosophical study, that it's essential to study secret doctrine with Voice of Silence together. So this is really crucial to the kind of inquiry that we're doing here. But back to the question of non-possession, so it's even how more, do I possess my body? You say my body, your body. We're barely even aware of our body. All the millions of things happening in any second. Does the body possess me? These are difficult questions. You guys are dancing. So the problem of non-possession in our activity, when, it's like in the Dana Paramita, when we give ourselves completely so that the sense of self, the activity of giving, and the object of giving merge into one. You can talk about that. Then in actual action, performing that is another question. Our daily life gives us little examples of how opportunities where this comes up, whether it's interaction with the clerk when we're buying groceries, or someone like earlier comes into the, we had some incident a little earlier and here where someone came in the door and like, okay, we're interacting and it's kind of giving way. So all these things come up, challenging our where we get stuck, where we're fluid and more open.
I have another question that might be a challenge question, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a challenge. Is what if the Buddha or somebody said, lighten the load. Okay, in other words, how would that fit into this idea of possessions and non-possession? So at least the subjective attitude of non-possession, because let's say that you're in a boat, you're going across a lake and there's an island, you got to get to the island, but there's too many possessions. Or here's another idea, the idea of a pilgrimage. You're going to go on a pilgrimage and you start overpacking your suitcase. And your roommate says, some pilgrimage you're on. That's not very pilgrimage-like. So wouldn't that be, isn't there kind of an objective component to this? Like when you go to the airport and the suitcase is more than 50 pounds? And you're telling them that it's
Well, the
objective?
big light goes on saying, non-possession.
Yeah, non-possession, yeah.
This is where it gets a little subtle and complicated. There both is and is not. You know, how the inner component interfaces with the outer component, you know, is, I think, it has to do with our need for possession, the need for control and possession. Someone may have it in their karmic destiny to be in a position that could appear to wield a lot of worldly power and possession. And this may be rare, but then maybe completely unattached to it. Someone else could have very few things. There's some Indian story comes to mind, of course. Someone may have very, 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 just like even following an ascetic lifestyle, but be very attached to it. And actually not be close to non-possession at all. So that's one more radical point you made. Of course, in general, in terms of the planet's needs today, possession is way out of control. Consumer society, etc. So that has to be looked at very honestly and objectively that way as well.
You can kind of see the wisdom of having subjective and objective just immediately prior to this presentation. I mean, from last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have any dialogue kind of questions or?
Well, there's the one particular quote from Jasper Neiman, where the earlier part, which was really covered both, I thought mostly. You might know which one I mean. I don't know if you can find it again. She's talking about how all, there's possession, but also there's the problem of possessing our mental and emotional attributes. So this is even more subtle and really like, how are we really free and liberated from those binds in our inner life or are we very possessive of our views and ideas and things?
That's where you could call that the acid test. You know what I'm saying? It's the real test.
Yes, yeah.
Because when it comes to external things, a person could, like you say, a person could be kind of faking it. But when it comes to the real internal attachment to what some people would call subjective possessions, I guess, like the virtues, there's a very subtle pride and attachment that can go into the virtues, it would seem. And here's another one. My meditation. Isn't that awesome? But that's a thought.
Yeah.
And meditation, the whole point is that you're getting above that.
Yeah, sometimes I've had the question come, what kind of meditation do you teach?
Yeah.
I said, well, no, it's different view. There's only one kind of meditation, human,
The humankind?
and there are some different techniques, but there's only human meditation, and we're all 98% similar. It kind of levels the playing field. What was the other part? Oh,
Well, I mean, you could say my meditation is a different technique compared to somebody else's, but I mean the possessive nature of it.
yeah, but depossessing again, it's, the problem of relinquishing self in the activity, even in these internal activities.
It seems that this thing about that possession is downstream of identity. So, and as we know that in theosophy, a lot of it has to do with identity and the function of ahankara.
Mm.
I am this, I am that. And there's systems in which ahankara is a fundamental part of our nature, the ability to identify. And so much of psychology is based on that.
Mm.
Well, a lot of theosophy is based on that, right? But downstream from that is what is our view towards possessions? And it seems that one way to work on elevating or broadening or drawing a larger circle in terms of one's feeling of brotherhood would be to really examine truthfully our relationship with possessions. In other words, if our attitude about possessions is downstream of identity, one way to get back to identity is to re-examine our relationship to possessions, it would seem. And as you're saying, Ken, our relationship to our possessions isn't just a cerebral thing. It's how do we actually live?
Mm.
It's how do we actually, it's what about these loving deeds? Okay, that leads to self-knowledge. And actually, that's what I was just saying. In other words, loving deeds yields the self-knowledge.
Mm.
So that in turn, and the loving deeds has to do with how we handle possessions, what we think are possessions. Do we think these possessions are really ours or not? Or are they consecrated? Like the body is a possession, you could say, but is it really mine? What if I consecrate my body, my faculties, my soul powers from previous lives, whatever I got? What if I consecrate it to the larger whole, to all of humanity? What if I consecrate it to my teacher? What if I consecrate it to the future? Then thinking of any kind of faculties that I may have, or even my body, any kind of instrumentality that I'm responsible for, then in holding it for my own, I have the sensation, wait a minute, I think I'm robbing it. I'm robbing it from this larger circle of identity. I'm robbing it from humanity. I'm robbing it from the future. And anyway, enough said, I think.
No, it's the essential point is the identity. So in both in Tibetan Buddhism, in Buddhism in general, and also in Theosophy, meditation on the interdependence of all life.
Yes.
And the meditation on the impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
And the no fixed identity, that it's continuously evolving. So these three forces are the antidote to this possessive problem. This core,
yes,
not
that's what I was trying to say. Yes.
Which is It's,
you want to open it up to, or
well, just one point you made about the virtues. This is a quote I just kind of like. It's from some Japanese and somewhere, but the good men of the village, we put good in quotes, the good men of the village are the thieves of virtue.
Wow.
So this, we have to be very, anyway, it says, it cuts through the,
So you mean like the so-called upstanding members of the community, stuff like that, or what do you mean by
could be like that, yeah.
so-called?
Proud of their achievements,
Yeah.
that I'm doing this great,
Well-
wonderful, beneficial thing,
Well regarded,
yeah,
probably.
thieves of virtue. And we see this acted out in our broader scope of in the worldly world of people of power today.
Do you want to open it up to
Yeah.
people? Well, I'm just saying, well, I think we could go ahead and open it up if anybody wants to raise their hand. I can't see the screen, but
Yeah.
Monica, no, just stay where you are, just kind of
Okay.
the thing here. Just call, if you can't see it, then go to the computer, but if you
No,
can see
I can
it,
see.
yeah.
There are a few hands up, but I believe that the first one was Judy Salzman. Hi there, Judy.
Hi, yes, I'd like to ask a question,
Go ahead.
of both of you regarding, the mysterious statement of Jesus. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, meek is an unfortunate translation because it has a connotation of kind of a wimpy person who's not strong, which is anything what Gandhi taught. But I think it means someone who's non-possessive, non-aggressive, non-violent. It isn't going to say, well, I won't share my territory with you because you're of a different religion, customs, or ethnicity, or simply because you're poor and been persecuted. You stay out of my territory. I mean, this is what is happening with Israel and the Palestinians. It's, it's happening on our border. It's really happening all over the world. This idea of this is mine and that's yours, even if you have nothing. And the horror is here we have a man who now claims to have $1 trillion. He's a friend of our president. You all know who he is.
Yep.
And how can he possess $1 trillion and let children go hungry in Africa, Gaza, all over the world? I mean, according to the Save the Children, a child dies every 10 seconds of hunger. I don't understand that, but I wonder if you would agree with that interpretation of the meek shall inherit the earth. I think it needs a better translation than the word meek. I would say maybe non-violent or non-possessive or non-aggressive or something in English.
He who says doesn't know, he who knows doesn't say.
The meek, I wish I had the Aramaic translation of those. I don't remember at the moment.
There is
But
the.
I would say, something like, if I would retranslate it into something like those who are free of their ego fixations inherit, even inherits not a good way for me. So maybe become those are free of their ego fixations, engage and have the capacity to become the wholeness of embodied earth, something like that.
That's great.
Yeah, and wouldn't they be kind of, this thing about inheriting the earth? That almost seems vulnerable to being misinterpreted too, right?
Yeah.
Like then all of a sudden, because that's like ownership. And we're trying to talk about non-possession. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna inherit the earth. So, but But I think it could have something to do with, and maybe others have a contribution to this. Is that such a person is like a new kind of, it's a new kind of leadership. That they are pioneering something. A new kind of Aquarian, you could say parapolitical, Taoist, you could say, leadership. Where the person is thinking inclusively. They're not thinking through the personality, they're thinking through the individuality, you could say. Gandhi was this guy that weighed what, 120 pounds, maybe less. So, and he wasn't this big guy or anything like that. You look at him and you see those photos of him walking, it just looks like energy and motion, just fluidity. And also he epitomized theosophical individuation in the way that he was always looking at things from a kind of a universal perspective. So he's not looking at things from the personal perspective in terms of rights. He was more onto like responsibilities, but in terms of the way HPB talks about what is duty, well, that's HPB says duty is what is due to humanity in the key to theosophy. Yeah, Monica?
Just a couple of things. One is that Judy Salzman has a response to you too.
Okay.
In the chat, so we might want to, if you could
Can you read it?
bring that up. Yeah, if he can bring it up.
Yeah, Jay, can you pull it up or?
I was just gonna make a quick comment.
Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
Jonathan is someone I collaborated with some years back, just talked about leadership for the common good
Mhm.
as encapsulating what you were.
Oh, yeah.
Or what, or I'm sorry, or Judy, maybe you can repeat what you put in the chat. It's not coming
Or
up
maybe-
very clear.
Sure, she could read it or,
Yeah. But it was in direct response to this, what you guys are saying here, so. She said, yes, a good translation in terms of what Ken, you were saying about the various replacements we could come up with that would sound more inclusive. In fact, if you don't mind, I would say that idea that Mr. Judge puts forth that comes up over and over and over again, acting for and as the self of all, gives a good stop to egotism and the idea of look at how good I'm doing and I've got the main idea and not necessarily you. So yeah, it just seems that that was what Mr. Judge had in mind in putting that statement forth. And one more thing, I wanted to know about this term that HPV put forth, transmural. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because to this student, it sounded like that wall that of chatter and thought that one has to get beyond in the practice of meditation. And it's also available to us, as we're told, in acts of service and of course in study too. So could you say a little something about that? Transmural. I never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's actually meaning is more subtle.
Okay,
It doesn't mean we're trying to get through this to get there.
okay,
That's what the word transcendent means.
okay.
We're here and we want to go there. So for some reason, I think it's quite wonderful. Blavatsky is saying transmural, which means it's the same from both sides.
Oh,
that's awesome.
That means that one Tibetan Lama said to me once, you have the 5 poisons, fear, anger, jealousy, etc., right? And then what they would call in Tibetan Buddhism, the 5 wisdom dakinis or the five wisdom beings, and they are the same. It's our misperception that thinks the five poisons and the five wisdom beings are different.
Oh,
The problem is what you talked about, Jonathan talked about, is this problem of self-fixating. This is the problem. Not, we think then, as we see it acted out, like in Plato's cave, we think it's in these things out there that we can point to. This is our delusion of separateness. When that collapses, the shadows are gone. And it's like, oh my goodness, they were never there.
Yeah.
So it's not really, and this is a big subject. I personally, in my tiny experience, not kind of off to the races where if we're doing a meditation practice or even a daily meditation practice, and if we start pointing out, oh, those things I need to change and get rid of, does it work? So that we could easily go down the rabbit hole and kind of play whack-a-mole with what we think. I'm thinking that is wrong, and I have to get rid of it, and then I will be really spiritual person. Okay, I think we're in trouble here. What do you think, Jonathan?
I think it's a great answer. Do you have any more? Is there anybody else?
No, we have a few, Desiree, you have a question?
I think David was before me.
Oh, I'm so sorry, David.
Well,
Go
it's
for
okay.
it.
It's okay.
I just thought it crossed the screen, forgive me.
You're forgiven. A little different slant on possession. How about the idea of being possessed?
I was wondering,
Some of the greatest things are done in the world by people that are possessed by an idea, and they're just constantly dealing with the person who's possessed by eradicating hunger in the world, for example, or something. And it's just so in there. You've actually touched on this a little bit, maybe about living for and as the self, but it's like it's the only thing we can do. Is that a kind of possession, a positive kind of possession?
yeah, well, I thought about that a little bit, but as I was thinking about that, driving down here actually earlier. Just some preliminary answers would be that if I'm possessed by my possessions, it's going to be hard for me to be possessed by a higher power or a higher ideal, it would seem, that it would be distract. So in other words, there is kind of a lower kind of possession that like some kind of evil spirit or elemental gets into me and starts competing for my mental space.
So let's talk about the higher ones then, because tonight we've been talking about the lower ones a lot, possessed of pride and all, all the lower kind of personality things.
But so if I'm possessed by those, it's going to be
Right.
higher, there are sublime influences. And especially if a person is working through a nucleus of universal brotherhood, there are going to be sublime influences over that nucleus and within that, coming through that nucleus. There's the story of the allegorical umbrella, where the person is holding the umbrella handle, and the sun and the radiance of the Mahatmas is actually coming down, and the what do you call it? The ridges of the umbrella are symbolic and so forth. And you holding on to the umbrella, and it's a way of tapping into this higher energy and so forth. But that's kind of mixed with the metaphor, the idea that the highest beings in the cosmos would be almost too intense for us, it would seem. And so there's a certain amount of purification that we would need. Interestingly enough, the next week's theme for reflection is going to be the idea of Kalki Maitreya. And one of the speakers was explaining to me that Kalki is a Hindu idea and Maitreya is a Buddhist idea. So it's kind of a mystic marriage of the Hindu and the Buddha idea of, and I noticed that the Hermes quote for that what had to do with the idea of the unconditional sunshine of these high beings, how they irradiate their efflorescence on all of humanity unconditionally. So it seems like a very appropriate theme to be thinking about on next Sunday, which is the 15th, which is 2 days prior to the 17th. And the 17th of November just happens to be 150 years exactly from the founding of the Theosophical Society. 50 years after the 1975 cycle. It is a time to be looking backwards, but obviously a time to be looking forward. And Ken, he's told me, you know, if you're going to be looking backward, you should be equally looking forward. I think that's a really awesome concept. And that another thing that's going to be taking place on the 15th is the lodge here in San Diego is going to be opening up its bookstore. We've been threatening to do that for years, but now we're going to finally do it. So yeah. So and so we're going to have a big party, and a lot of people are coming. And our two speakers for the Aquarian are going to be coming here from really far away, and they're going to be speaking here in person. And it's going to be something I think pretty remarkable. So anyway, and then now that I think it's the time's up for our meeting. Right now.
Well, we had Desiree
Okay,
with her hand up a long time, so she can be the last
yeah.
question, if that's okay.
Desiree, you got the last word.
Go for it, Des.
Well, I think through this transmuralizing, David took my question comment. So, because that was pretty much the same thing I was going to comment about. And that is the idea of possession or being possessed by something. And it made me think of people who, we don't become attached to things. We become attached to the stimulation we receive from things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's discussed all along through our meditative process, is that stimulation that we get, that heart rate that goes up, that adrenaline, that good feel. And if you were to eliminate that, if you were to eliminate the stimulation of jealousy, for instance, or greed, or, you know, any of those things that make the heart just run a little bit faster, if you were to eliminate those feelings and the attachment to those feelings, people would only strive to get what they need, because that's all they would see. So when I see a person, and I can use myself as an example, if I get too wound up and I want something too bad, that's a stimulation. And that is what I think I can call possession, because now that stimulation is possessing the mind of the individual. It's overwhelming it versus the mind overwhelming that stimulation. Does that make us, does that make any sense? Because PTSD is an example of this in a way, because if the body has been stimulated for so long in a certain way, or maybe there's one traumatic experience, it's going to suffer that stimulation ongoing. So it takes a mind that can kind of be able to separate the two. And but if you don't allow yourself or don't know how to separate the two, and if you start to identify with that stimulation, that's when you can become, I would call, possessed by it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's interesting that when a possession can have to do with identity. Go ahead, Ken. Why don't you wrap this thing up?
Possession, non-possession, not possessing.
Not possessing.
Non-possession It's a big subject, but just briefly, our limited self wants to work these things out as if we are the director. And we're not. So in the heart, in the essence of these karmic things that arise that we perceive as problematic, jealousy, anger, fears, traumas, PTSDs, within those, in the essence of those things, is a gift also.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we have to then dismiss and replace with the gift we want to make it into. It's there in its own essence. And the exploration to make is to invite it in very, very, very closely and quietly and calmly, closer, closer, closer. And then in some traditions, and I believe this is true, it self-liberates. There's a gift in there of great energy. Things aren't divided really dualistically between good and bad. So in approaching that very carefully, sometimes it takes help and guidance to do that, then something much greater is possible. And that's an actual avenue for all of us. Like, this opens up something that should go into like a several hour.
Well, it seems to do with the healing of elementals by doing that.
Yeah.
That there's going to be a liberation.
There's a short story, Tibetan, apocryphal, mythic story. Milarepa in his cave on this 12-year retreat, visited by demons, And he's doesn't know what to do with them. Then he thinks, oh, I'll offer them tea. So he's feeding this demons come, he makes them an offering. So we're making an offering to our inner demons. We're offering something. Demons come. They're happy, it's working, he's very happy, And then time goes by, and then one big demon comes in. Uh-oh. Tea's not gonna work. Big mouth is open, it's ready to swallow him, ready to be possessed, right? So what does he do? He puts his head in the demon's mouth, and the demon bursts into life.
Wow.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming.